the Byzantine Empire. So basically, again, you guys don't really need to know a lot about the Byzantine Empire, I wouldn't say. I'll give you a little bit of an overview of it. Again, just think about some of the big themes. You're not going to be asked a lot of details about them on the exam, but in order to understand the development of Western countries, Western culture in the 1200s, 1300s, 1400s, you're going to have a basic understanding of the Byzantine Empire. So have you guys heard much about them before? Do you guys know much about the Byzantines?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what do you know? Let's hear.
Okay. So first of all, so after Constantine the Great, after Constantine the Great defeated his rival, and became sole Augustus of the empire, so he established a new city at like what was previously known as the city of Byzantium, which was founded by the Greeks. Now, Constantine the Great saw Byzantium as a place of crucial importance, because it was along the Bosphorus, and controlled the strait between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. So he wanted to make a new city there. Of course, because his name's Constantine, he called the city Constantinople, which kind of means that it's named after him. Okay, so after Constantine died, so Constantine was, in a sense, he was kind of like the last guy, in a sense, great emperor of both East and West, because after that, the internal divisions within the Roman Empire ultimately split between East and West. Now, of course, there are a few after him. There were a few after him, such as, I remember, Theodore, who tried to unite, or was Theodore before him? I don't know, but there was another emperor called Theodore the Great who tried to unify both East and West. However, in the end, during his later years, it failed, and he died in a sense in shame. Now, so after the Western Empire fell to the barbarians in 476 CE, the Eastern Empire, however, still remained afloat, and in a sense was kind of prosperous, and they also inherited the Roman legacy. Now, as you see in a slide, Justinian was one of like the great Byzantine empires who tried to reconquer the West. Again, he succeeded, but after his death, it failed. So after that, the Byzantines just kind of gave up their hope of reconquering Rome. And also one more thing about the Byzantines, they were the center. So after the Great Schism, in Christianity, they held like the dominant power, and they held the dominant power in the Orthodox Church of Christianity. So they were no longer Catholics.
Well, that's great. I'm really impressed by your knowledge here. And yeah, they have some attempts. They try to they very briefly reconquer Rome, but then they lose it again. And sort of forever, these eastern and western parts of the Mediterranean are divided. So this shows you the changes of the Byzantine Empire over time. So the very first image here is in 476. This is after the Western Empire in Rome was conquered, and the last Western emperor was deposed. So that's the starting year. But yeah, this will just give you a little bit of idea about the changes of the territory over time. 476. Next, we have 550 here. So you can see they've reconquered Rome. Of course, this is not going to last very long. You can see by the 700s, most of their territory is in Anatolia, which is now modern day Turkey, as well along the Aegean Sea, some small parts of the Italian peninsula, parts of Greece. So this is this in the period of time that we're talking about, this is more or less what the empire looks like around the rise of Islam. You can see here. So they do make a pretty good comeback, as you can see. They conquer a lot of the Balkans here. They push up into Bulgaria. Like a lot of the area up there was controlled by like Bulgarian tribes. So you can see they do. It's a very interesting empire because it lasts 1,000 years, and the borders are constantly changing. It's getting attacked and it shrinks, and then it grows again and it shrinks again. So it's very interesting, but also very complicated to study. And now let's take a look how it progresses. Continues to shrink, grows a little bit again, shrinks again, shrinks even more to almost nothing, and then finally it gets conquered. So yeah, that's just to give you an idea of where the Byzantine Empire was. But again, just kind of think about modern day Greece, modern day Turkey, Constantinople, of course. Do you guys know what it's called today? Istanbul, yeah. So that's more or less the territory. Okay, there's another map. So aside from the politics of it, it's also an important period to study because it's the first major split in the Christian church. So after Jesus died, the Christianity began to spread, but it wasn't like it is today. They didn't have all the books of the Bible. They didn't have a codified series of beliefs. It was much more decentralized. But then afterwards, Constantine, he converts to Christianity. Later, Christianity becomes the official religion of the Roman Empire. And then after this sort of split takes place, as I said, Rome is divided into the East and the West. And then after the different barbarian groups conquer the Italian peninsula, there's this permanent divide between the two areas. Not just politically, but also culturally and spiritually. And they start to develop very different beliefs from one another. We're not going to get into all of the differences right now, but it's just important to note that the East and the West start to develop their own form of Christianity. And in the East, in the Byzantine Empire, they in the end they end up separating and breaking off. And in the West, it becomes the Catholic Church. And then in the East, it becomes the Orthodox Church, which is still today. It's still around today. Of course, not in Turkey, because now Turkey is a Muslim country. But do you guys know what are some of the Eastern Orthodox countries today?
Russia, Georgia, Armenia, they all are.
Good, yeah. Russia, yeah. Some parts of Georgia. Georgia's also have a lot of Muslims too. But yeah, Armenia, Ukraine. So a lot of these countries now, even today, they follow the Eastern Orthodox. Other things that happen is the creation of the Hagia Sophia. Maybe you guys have heard of this before. It's this now. It's the minarets here. They were added later. But yeah. So this is one of the churches that's created by the Byzantine Empire. And it even stands today in modern day Turkey and modern day Istanbul. So that's one of the legacies that they have. Step 1. Step 2. Okay, so once again, step 1, read the document. Step 2, answer the questions below. And then step 3, we're going to share with the class. And while you're listening to the other students, I want you guys to write down just a few point form notes, okay? That will help you guys to be able to answer these questions for the homework. So we have the author is Yakut. Like we could say maybe he's a writer, Islamic. So yeah, we can tell he's an Islamic writer. Like you said, it's probably a secondary source that's describing the city. It doesn't really read like a first-hand account. So he might have been a later author describing the city. It's unclear if he was actually there. And he's writing about basically, the history of Baghdad, the history of the Abbasids. This ties into this too. When? I mean, it says 1000 CE, roughly. When and where. Location unknown, but we can assume he. So yeah, the location, it doesn't really say. I tried to look it up, actually. I came across this primary source, and I thought it was really cool. But this guy, Yakut, I couldn't find a lot about him. It's a great source, and I think it's a secondary source, but it's quite an old one, which sometimes leads to almost like a paradox, if you will, like a very strange occurrence where if a secondary source is old enough, it's also a primary source. It's both a primary and a secondary source. Anyways, that's a bit complicated, though. Don't worry about that. But yeah, so he's living like it says, writing around 1000 CE. The location's unknown, but we can safely assume that that he's a Muslim writer that is living in the Islamic world. Okay, so what is he? What did you say he discusses? Oh, sorry, I can't hear you.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I was muted.
Yeah.
Okay. So he first talks about the prosperity of Baghdad under Abbasid rule. Then he also talks about the power and wealth of the Caliph.
Oops. Okay. Prosperity of Baghdad. Wealth of the Caliph or the Caliphate, yeah. Okay. And what other things does he talk about? Okay, so what I think is pretty cool, if you look up here, so let me read this. The city of Baghdad formed two vast semicircles on the right and left banks of the Tigris, 12 miles in diameter. The numerous suburbs, covered with parks, gardens, villas, and beautiful promenades, and plentifully supplied with rich bazaars, finely built mosques and baths, stretched for a considerable distance. So here are some things here that other things we can talk about. Maybe that there was there was a lot of trade. He talks about the marketplaces. So you can tell that it's a trade hub. There's a lot of trade going on, things like that. He talks about how he makes the city sound very developed too. Look at this. There's numerous suburbs with parks, gardens, villas, things like that. So from this, we can infer that it's a very developed urban area. Urban. There we go. So yeah, there's highly developed urban districts. Again, maybe there's lots of mosques, there's lots of temples, so maybe they have advanced engineering techniques. Some other things that I thought were pretty interesting in here. Where did it go? Here it is. So look. Immense streets, none the less than 40 cubits wide, traverse the city from one end to the other, dividing it into blocks or quarters, each under the control of an overseer or supervisor who looked after the cleanliness, sanitation, and the comfort of the inhabitants. So yeah, we can say that they have, we could also say here that they have a sanitation. They have sanitation systems. So we'd say this is pretty advanced stuff. Do you know what was sanitation like in Europe during this time?
Disease and like the Black Death. So
yeah, exactly. So I know this is a bit of a gross topic, but in most of the Middle Ages in Europe, if you had to go to the bathroom, what would you do?
You would have a bucket, and then you pour it out your window.
Exactly. And once it was poured out your window, what do you think happened to it?
It just rotted on the streets.
Exactly. So if we think about this at the time, most European cities, I don't know if any did. Like most European cities didn't have much of a sanitation system. That was it. You went to the toilet in a bucket, and you went. Here's the window beside me. You went and you chucked it out the window, and that was it. So to have him mention in 1000 CE that, not only did they have, markets and gardens and all these things like that, they have a sanitation system. They have people that are responsible for cleaning. They have people that are responsible for getting rid of waste. For a city over 1,000 years ago, that's some pretty remarkable stuff. There's another thing that really impressed me in this document here, and it was two things, actually. Every household was plentifully supplied with water at all seasons by numerous aqueducts. So they have sanitation systems. They have fresh. So they have, not only do they have sanitation, they have fresh water being brought in by the aqueducts into the city. It says there every family had fresh water. Another thing, an immense square in front of the imperial palace was used for reviews, military inspections, tournaments, races, and at night the squares and streets were lighted by lamps. So look at, what else they have? They have street lamps.
They have light system.
Yeah. So you can see here that what is being described, and again, you always have to be a little bit skeptical. You have to think to yourself, okay, is this all true, or is he just trying to make the city look good? You have to think about this in your mind. But at the same time, the things that he's describing, organized city districts, sanitation systems, fresh water, street lamps. Again, these are all pretty remarkable things that were not seen in European cities at the time. During Rome, under the Roman Empire, a lot of cities were much more organized, and under the Byzantines, but most of Western Rome had, fallen into disarray after the fall of Rome. And so all of these things you would not see in the streets of a Western European city at the time.